good evening. I really wanted to thank John for that presentation. Kit, great presentation. I think I just saw now from John's presentation that Bobby's 60-hour work week has just turned into 120 hours. He's our site manager, so I think he's going to spend all this more time on the social media side. I never knew that. How much time you could spend in replying to people's reviews. My cybersecurity defense side of my mind starts thinking, well, how does someone game this? How does someone actually turn this into a bad side? So I'm not going into that. I'm just going to talk a little bit more about, I thought it would be beneficial to talk about nonprofit and small business cybersecurity and defense, because that is where we're kind of fitting right now with inside of the UTSA cybersecurity program as mentors. But also here, I think that was what I was hearing was this is mainly a lot of small businesses, but what is in reality some of those things that you can do? And we can just go to the next slide. So a little bit about myself. I've had 30 years in technology. My parents started me very young. I don't know if any of y'all have seen the movie Ready Player One. I read the book, and this person was writing my life. I'm like, I had that computer, and I had that computer. I had the TRS-80. I had the 1K Timex Sinclair. My dad just gave me everything and got me doing payroll at a very young age, working with my dad with his small business. So that was kind of where I started. And then from nonprofit, working in a church as an intern and doing the technology there, going into college, going off, joining the military, then going back to the commercial world. And finally, it settled. Been 5 years with MITRE, and I've loved it ever since. And I think that's always been my passion, helping people out, giving them that trusted advisor type of perspective on things. So that's where I come from. And I kind of said, yes, a veteran of the Air Force. Did not get to that retirement, but really enjoyed my 8.5 years in, and wanted to get married, settle down, and stay here in San Antonio, Colorado. But I'm responsible for a lot of architecture and engineering and integrating of cybersecurity and defense. And I'm going to break those down a little bit and how they're a little bit different. I know y'all are going through cybersecurity. I think that defense is slightly different. The Air Force, the DoD kind of looks at it a little bit differently than the commercial world. And then last of all, this mentorship that Kit, Bobby, and I have been with for this is our third semester. And it is truly something that I enjoy doing, because for me, I'm not an extrovert or an outgoing person to speak up, but when it comes to training, that's really where my passion is. I want to be able to see someone pick up what I'm giving to them and then see them using that and be able to pass it on to someone else. So it's almost like you're teaching someone else how to fish, and then you expect them or want them to be able to teach someone else. Next slide. So I thought, where do we start? In a small business level, why do cybersecurity and defense? Let's talk about those threats. Those are the things that are out there. A lot of people think nobody's going to pick on me. I'm really small. It's just me. It's just me and my family. We're doing something. But we've already heard the one example of ransomware. So with that, that's one of those things that happens. But first of all, data exfiltration. There are people out there that want to get your data and make a profit. Whether it be the identities of people that you have with inside your website, credit card numbers, personal private information, they want to grab that because you've already accumulated it for your business, but you might not be protecting it well. And someone would like to get a hold of that. Intellectual property. Companies that have those patents, those things that they spend all their time and they're actually turning it into a service, and that's what makes them profitable. There are companies that want to be able to steal that and be able to be other companies, but also countries and things like that. So that's what they're looking for. But also that identity theft, privacy information, other things that can lead to further compromises. So that's what they're looking for. Ransomware. Just like in a real situation, ransom of kidnapping somebody for the purpose of getting a payout. I personally am not involved with it. I mean, Kit gave a really good example of that. But it is to a point, making sure your data is not accessible, but then giving that sense that you will, encouraging or convincing you to pay out so they will actually give it back, because the cost of you reconstituting everything is probably going to be higher than them just unlocking. But the problem is not too many people can want to trust it, or it actually happens. Your money is gone, there's no insurance. And then that forced downtime. So with this, these are all the ones that I kind of Google searched and looked through all these different pages. What are these different things? These are those top three, but the forced downtime is there might be someone competitor that wants to just prevent your service from happening. And then, like John was saying, be able to circumvent and send those customers over to them because they're the next one in line. So with this, how do they do these type of things? It's easier than you think. So it's through email and malicious URLs. It is no cost to an adversary to be able to just send out all these things. They can go out there to the dark web. They can pay for these email lists and get this and just send it out. There's no charge for the bits. They have a connection to the internet and it's just sending it out. Now, if they compromise your system, you just become someone that can actually send it out for them. And it's coming out through a different way, so they're less likely to be shut down. That's where those botnets and things like that come from. You don't want to be that person that gets compromised and then used for those type of malicious emails with those attachments and URLs. And then this social media redirection. This is happening more. If you have the things that John was talking about, there could be vulnerabilities inside of these chat functions that someone can actually send something out. You hover over it, click on it, or something like that. It's just redirected you, and then you get infected because your phone or your device or your home computer might have that vulnerability that they're exploiting. So they're seeing this happening. And then last of all, go back to those passwords, reuse of passwords. Inside of our second semester, I got access into the threat intelligence that is available out there. There's commercial threat intelligence that you can have that scours the dark web and starts accumulating all these usernames and passwords that have been compromised, that people are actually selling. And I did a query through this last semester for all the nonprofits that we looked at. Every single one of them had a leak of a password associated with the username. When I sent it to the mentors, they sent it off to the nonprofits and said, these folks have had past leaks, have had leaked usernames and passwords in the past year. But a lot of people would say, well, that's not my password for my login to Office 365 or G Suite or something like that. Well, they use that username and password on their external site. And how many external sites do you log into with your email address? It was associated with. Now, it's terrible when someone reuses that exact same password or a permutation of it. People get, they're doing those brute forces off of all those different permutations of the password. You're not getting a notification, hey, someone tried to log into your account 100 times. So these are the things that should scare people is when you are starting to do that. And with that reuse of passwords, I just got to tell you, I am really much more of an advocate when I can't have that two-factor or multi-factor authentication. Really, my iPad, I look at that and says, would you like me to suggest you a password and store the password vault? I'm like thinking, yes, I'm going to try that out. And I started using it more, and I like it. Because I know that I'm actually spreading it out, so if something gets compromised, how difficult that is, at least it's just going to be one side. So, next slide, please. So, when we started with our students every semester, we talk about what model of cybersecurity do we want to do in this assessment. And this might look kind of foreign on the right, but there's 4 quadrants. At the bottom, on the left side, fundamental concepts of these cybersecurity frameworks to these very comprehensive frameworks that you can look at. But then on the y-axis, the narrow focus and the widely applicable. These are where it's almost like a Gartner study. Someone said, here's all the frameworks out there. Which one do you want to choose? And I think that's where small businesses and nonprofits kind of go, I have no idea where to start. And it's overwhelming. You can go to some of these things, like the NIST 800-53. That's our risk management framework of the government. There's like 3 volumes of this, over 1,000 pages of just security controls. Who's going to sit down and read that and say, I'm going to implement that for my nonprofit? No one. Because it is a government program that we're trying to do an enterprise installation, enterprise security, protection, and defense for a broad range of systems. They just want to be very thorough and make sure you're approved to operate in a secure, in an unclassified, controlled unclassified, secret or top secret environment. That would probably not be a good one for a nonprofit. But I'm going to focus in on one of them, right in the middle, CIS, the CIS Top 20. It was also known as the SAM Top 20. I think that's probably one of the best places to go. So next slide. So I know this is an eye chart. I have a better one on the next page, but I want to kind of tell you a little history on this. So what they have is 1 through 20, and they've actually ranked it probably from the most impact of implementing it in probably the least amount of cost in doing it. So when I was part of the red team, Air Force red team, we would go out and do penetration tests and see how far we could get into Air Force bases. This is back in 2003. We eventually became the blue team. And with that, we were doing vulnerability assessments, compliance assessments, and things like that. Well, after we did that compliance assessment and vulnerability assessment for about 5 years, we went ahead and said, wait a second. Let's look at the past years of all of our observations, findings, and recommendations and see if there's some commonality. When we did that, we compared it to the SAM, because someone said, hey, I just went to the SAM conference. It was great. We looked at it in the first 10, we're almost an identical match of what we found over the past 2 years to what they actually have recommended. And that's where it sold me back then. I said, this is where we need to go. There's been some government efforts that started back in 2011 through 13, where they were pushing for to say, you need to implement number 1, number 2, number 3. And then that's where I found this next slide. Go ahead, go to the next slide. Where it broke these 20 into 3 levels. Basic, foundational, and organizational. And it still stays in those orders. So that's where I kind of wanted to camp out here a little bit, just talk a little bit about it. So with the first one, I apologize that it might be a little bit small, but inventory control and hardware assets. The one nonprofit that I'm doing this semester, we're doing tech. So we've gone ahead and got into their network, plugged into the network, and we did something as simple in Nmap. We wanted to see what's available on this subnet of 250 computers. And we found what was there at a certain time during the day when no one was there. This is your baseline. And then when people start coming in, we wanted to start seeing that. We were actually looking over the network, watching the traffic. Yes, it went out the firewall. We could actually start seeing all those active systems. Bring your own device, iPads, laptops, things like that into this nonprofits organization and tell them, here's your baseline, and here's your surge of all the people that show up. Do you know what they're bringing into your facility? They don't. And, if anything, your cell phones, do you know that they actually have a privacy mode in them? When you join a Wi-Fi network nowadays, it gives us, a whole different MAC address. It gives a different ID. You show up the next day, it's a different ID. You show up the next day, it's another ID. That would frustrate the administrators on that network. But you own the network, you control it. Why not say, everybody, if you're going to be on our network, you need to register with me so we can actually have some accountability. If you brought a virus in here, we need to shut you down and inform you. So these are things that would be helpful in inventory management at a hardware level. And then we get into software inventory. So with the nonprofit, we were able to get a collection of a few of their workstations, and we converted them from a physical hard drive into a virtual one so we could leave their computer with them. And we basically took it back to our lab, and that's where we're looking at and saying, what software do you have installed on this? Which version do you have running? What's the vulnerabilities on these versions that you're running? These are the things that you can start introducing at a nonprofit or small business to just know yourself, both your hardware and software, and that kind of talk a little bit about vulnerability management. There are some huge assets out there, even MITRE CVEs, common vulnerabilities and exploits that you can look up for all these different things available to you today. It might be a little bit manual at the beginning, but any IT person worth their weight is going to start figuring out how to automate some of these things so it's quicker. So that's the type of thing. If you're looking for an IT company, say, do y'all learn your lessons in automating? And then control use of your administrative privileges. That's where, I think that's where, when you look at Microsoft and Google and a lot of these different cloud providers for small business, has done tremendous things. You now can take your workstation and actually register it to a domain that you have that you pay just, less than $100 a month for it to be managed in the cloud. So now you can actually lock that workstation when it gets compromised. You can wipe the hard drive just like your phones and your tablets. So you have those controls that you can do it because it's available now in these cloud services that are offered to nonprofits. Even at nonprofits, it's even a more reduced price. But with small businesses, it's definitely within the budget. And then last of all, secure configurations, maintenance and monitoring, and auditing of your logs. Those are some things that you can actually package together. So those are the first 6 things I would say you absolutely can do, and that's what we focused on this semester with our technical assessment. And I think that's where we're looking at. If we have a repeat, we would probably want to move that nonprofit up to the next level and do that the next semester, and then move it up to the next level. And you probably have 3 attempts for a nonprofit from UTSI and Cybersecurity team to say, in 3 semesters, we've completed an entire assessment across the 20 control areas from SANS and from CIS. So I think that was so with that, it gets even more complex, but you definitely need to have a good team that's ready to do that analysis and put it into a report. So next slide, I think that might have been it. Okay, and I go a little bit more in detail about how we're doing it. I don't think that's really, and you don't have the slides for this, but that's what we're doing across those first.